Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. And today we're talking about the costs that go into setting up an e-commerce store. I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts on that. And it's a really typical step after someone goes through a successful Kickstarter, Indiegogo campaign, or in general, just wanting to start selling online. So we're going to get into that today. I think you're going to like it a lot. Okay, so again, my name is Salvador Briggman. On this channel, we talk a lot about crowdfunding and specifically Kickstarter, Indiegogo, ways to actually start a new product-based business and how to kind of get that going, how to raise funds, etc., how to market your campaign. But today, I really want to get more into e-commerce, which to me is like the next step when it comes to Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And e-commerce is one of those things that I think is a little bit complicated for the newbie. So I kind of want to get into some of the basic tips when it comes to thinking about the costs that go into that and understanding it just a tiny bit better. Okay, so when it comes to setting up an e-commerce store, there are kind of the common costs and common phases that you go through with the store. So rather than just like rattling off the different costs, I kind of want to walk you through the process that you're going to be taking going from just starting the store to really getting to the point where you're having a profitable scaling store and you're really starting to make a living out of this thing, and kind of how the costs change, as well as for your budget level, how the costs might be different when it comes to time related costs versus financial costs and some of the different decisions that you're going to make there. Okay, so with these costs, the first thing is going to be the actual web presence. And I guess in order for me to first even go down that route, I have to say, like, I'm assuming you already have the product. You already have whatever it is you're going to sell, right? So this video kind of starts after that point in time where you already have the product, you know the sourcing, where it's coming from, the manufacturer, maybe you have the initial molds for it, the resources that it's being made out of, you understand the logistics and the shipping information or the fulfillment provider. Shout out to Fulfill Right, check them out down below. They're one of the sponsors of my channel. But you already have a lot of that information already, and you're like, I'm ready to go with the store. So just so you know, I'm starting the video with that. Now that you have that kind of self-assurance and you're like, okay, we're gonna go forward with the store, there are two main things you're gonna need when it comes to just getting the bare bones of the thing up and running. And that's gonna be a domain name, and that's gonna be deciding on the CMS, also known as the content management system, or the platform that you choose to run the store on. So these sometimes are done together. For example, you might get like a Wix and then also get a domain name at the same time, but they're not always. And usually when they're not, it's because someone already has an idea for a domain name. Like, dude, I want to get this. I want to reserve this, right? I want to make sure no one else gets this. And they buy the domain name first from like GoDaddy or oneonone.com, which is now like Ionos or whatever. So they might have already gotten the domain name, and then they're porting the domain name over to the store provider that they choose to go with. So the first one is get the domain name, right? Do that ASAP. And the reason is that I've had so many coaching students, I've shared this in other videos, so many coaching students who fail to do it, and then they realize they go and check and they're like, oh, someone else took it. And it sucks because you had a great idea, someone else took it. So for some reason, or someone else was able to track the search traffic or whatever. It goes beyond my understanding, right? But make sure you do it. Make sure you get it pretty soon so that no one else does. And it's like maybe, $10 to $15 per year to own a domain name. More of a high quality one. Like by high quality, I guess I mean .tips or like .store or one of these fancy domain names with a different back end, not .com or whatever. That might be like $50 a year, $30 a year. If you're doing like a really premium domain name that maybe has some keywords in the title and someone else already owns it and you're buying it from them, might be between $1,000 to $5,000. On the higher end, maybe $10,000 to $20,000 if it's a really big one. I think the most I've personally seen a domain name sold for is around $30K, 30 to like $50K, I think. So it's going to vary, but if it's like a super high quality one, obviously the costs are going to go up. So that's going to be your first expense. And for the average person, I'd say it's usually a pretty small expense, usually like more than the $10 to $15 per year kind of a range. After that, let's just say that they're different processes. After that, you're then going to decide which platform you want to host the store on. So this is kind of similar to deciding like, what is my website going to run on essentially. So there are a lot of different online store platforms out there. Some of the common ones I see a lot of people going with are Shopify, Magento, WordPress and WooCommerce, And you know, WordPress usually have to host on something like Bluehost or another hosting provider that's out there. Wix, sometimes people will be using Wix for their e-commerce, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different, you know, options to go with. Typically, when someone comes to me and they ask me, what do you recommend? I'm usually recommending Shopify, unless they already have some like really big established base on some other kind of a platform or something like that. Usually I'm recommending Shopify. The reason is that there are just so many apps and themes and community and resources available with a Shopify store. Now, the downside, it's a little bit more complicated than just doing something like a Wix, right? It's a bit more complicated, and usually when someone's doing a Shopify store, if they have any kind of a budget, they're usually hiring someone else to help them with either installing themes, and managing the store, setting up functionality, that kind of stuff. So to me, if you have a bit of budget, Shopify is usually the way to go. And also, if you don't want to be changing stores like a year from now, it's usually better, in my opinion, to go with a more robust solution. Like, would you want to develop a house and it be made out of shoddy materials or not have a great foundation? You got to replace the thing, right? In a year's time. Doesn't make sense to me. Might as well just go with what's already a robust solution. And in terms of costs, typically e-commerce store is going to be like maybe $30 to $150 per month, depending on the functionality. You can usually get a pretty good one for, you know, $50 a month to $100 a month. It really depends on the plan that you are on. The lowest tiers you can get like $30 and even a little bit under, but I wouldn't really skimp on it. And here's why. Typically, the middle stage kind of plans, while it does seem expensive, this is your first time ever spending money online, it can seem expensive. However, I really urge you to have more of a business-minded purchasing mindset than a consumer-based one. So consumers are always looking for the best deal, right? Is the sale happening? Can I save 10% on this? Right? They're thinking in more of the ways of like cheap and like, how do I get something for not a lot? Business owner is more so thinking, how do I get something that's robust, that's going to serve me for years to come, and that I can write off as an expense on my taxes, right? So if you have an LLC or you have a corporation, you can write that business expense off of your taxable income, and it's just like a no-brainer. As long as you have like another business, a bank set up and that kind of stuff, it's gonna lower your taxable income regardless. So why not invest in something that's gonna be good and grow your business over the long run instead of cheaping out, right? Because you'll have to pay higher taxes anyway, right? Doesn't make sense. But that being said, so let's just say that you're gonna go with either Shopify or one of these other ones that I mentioned, or you can go and look at some of the other ones. After you make that decision, you're then gonna start to assess the functionality that you need in that store. Now, sometimes just the bare bones, Shopify or whatever is gonna be good enough for you. You might not need like a super fancy theme, or you're not interested in investing in that at this point in time, and that's okay. It's okay. Everyone's at different stages with this. Everyone has different budgets. Everyone has a different vision, right? So it's okay. Don't ever let anyone tell you that it's like not okay just to go with where you are. But if you do want to kind of give yourself the best chance of success, most people typically are going to be identifying a few different free and premium apps that they can install on their store. That's why I like Shopify. It's really easy to install. If it's WordPress, let's just say WordPress and WooCommerce, you might be thinking about some of the different WordPress plugins or paid plugins that you might want to install to enhance the functionality of your store. The other thing would be making a decision when it comes to the theme. So the look and the feel of the store, right? So it's kind of similar to if you are opening up a coffee shop, let's just say in Brooklyn, there's a very specific look to coffee shops in Brooklyn. If it looks kind of out of nowhere, it doesn't look like it fits in the surroundings, and it's not like hipster in some way, it's not ironic, it might just seem like no one's gonna go to it. It just doesn't make sense. If it's like a diner and like an old school diner and it doesn't really fit in with the environment, no one's going to because they don't want that kind of vibe in that area, then it's not gonna make a lot of sense. So you wanna make sure you have a good theme, looks professional, looks high quality, has modern functionality that's built in, and by that I mean things like responsive layout so people can view it on mobile, also view it on your desktop, and using the best development practices that are current for the time at which you're watching this video. That's going to be, to me, just a no-brainer winner decision for you. And typically it's not even that expensive. Now, when you get to this point in time, this is when most people begin to think about, okay, like this is either in my wheelhouse or I have no idea what Sal is talking about right now. Like, you're either gonna fall into one of those camps. If it's in your wheelhouse, great. That means you probably have a little bit of technical experience. You might also have some design ideas when it comes to it. And for that kind of person who has a lower budget or just wants to do it themselves, it's completely possible. Just go and watch through lots and lots of tutorials, understand how it works, the platform you're going with, right? Make sure that you are picking some good apps and tools and themes and that kind of stuff. You understand the color scheme you're going for with the brand and that kind of stuff. And you might be able to get plug and play with some other people who can help you out when it comes to like the logo, etc. And you can maybe get something done. Eventually, at some point, if you are the business owner, you're probably going to transition out of that role in the future and focus more on sales or marketing or sourcing new products and coming up with new product ideas. If you're in the other camp, which is like, this is like out of my wheelhouse, I have no idea what you're talking about, Sal. You're going way over my head. You're talking too fast. You're explaining too much, right? That might be a good indication that you should work with someone else. Like, for example, a partner, a marketing agency, to hire an employee, any of those kinds of things in order to begin to get a robust store set up. Now, the downside here is that you got to have a budget. You know, it costs money, obviously. You need to be able to invest in the store, and you have to be willing to invest with people that know what they're doing. The upside to that is that you don't have to spend your time doing it. And your role in the process is just to kind of revise work, right? And usually there's kind of two types of business owners or clients that I typically get. One is one who is very like nitty gritty, micromanager, hands-on, and there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. It's an analogy that I usually have, which is like you're almost hiring a designer to design your interior of your house, let's just say, and you're telling them, I want this color, I want this furniture, I want this rug, I want this flooring, I want this color palette, I want this, I want this, I want this. And you might have a very crystal clear idea of what you want. If you have experience in design, great, makes a lot of sense. If you don't, and you don't have experience, for example, in what is required, the types of materials to go in a house, then it's like you're making a lot of decisions maybe, but it might not end up the way you want. So when you are in that kind of more of a mindset, to me, it behooves you as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, to lean a little bit on the creativity of the person that you're working with. So rather than just kind of starting hard charging and be like, I want this, I want this, I want this, right? Be a little bit more like, hey, do you think that you can maybe bring a few ideas to me, right? Can you bring a few color palettes or potential themes or what you're thinking first, and then we can discuss it. And what that kind of accomplishes is that, similar to like an interior designer, they're gonna bring you a few of their ideas after they hear out what you want. You're then gonna be like, oh, actually, I really like that. I would never have thought of that, right? You're gonna pick that one, maybe make a few adjustments, and then you're gonna go with that. Versus had you gone just with the micromanaging approach, you maybe are going to get exactly what you want, but you wouldn't be aware of all these other potential options that are out there that person might know just because they've been doing interior design for so long, right? Or because they understand just, color schemes or whatever. So there's that approach, right? Which is the micromanaging approach. The other is just to kind of go with someone and to just leave it in their hands, and to you being the business owner to just be quality control checking and making sure the things are getting done that you need to get done, and trusting them to deliver a good solution for you or good colors or layout or whatever. And the risk there is that there might be a revision required, but if you have frequent touch bases or something like that, it might not be as an issue. But if you, take, for example, let them go work for, 3 months at a time or something like that, and then they come back and you don't like the thing, that might be an issue because that person then has to put in more work, right? So there's always like this synergistic approach of trying to get creative work done. And to me, that is really important, and where you're going to be investing a tiny bit of your time, but also some of your financial resources when it comes to getting that theme up and running. The next part, after you have gone through that, let's just say you got a robust store on the platform which you're happy with, you got all the themes, you got the plugins or the apps or the things that you've installed, the bells and whistles, right, to get the functionality where you want it to be. The next step is then begin to think about turning on the thing and then beginning to optimize to a degree, and more expenses come in at this point in time, and here's why. So up until this point, you've been creating a store, right? And you think this is gonna be the best store and it's gonna be an amazing layout and like people are gonna love it And no matter who it is that's out there, I'm telling you, like, no one has a crystal ball. They don't know until you get visitors into the actual store. The only time there maybe is a crystal ball is if like you're building a franchise, right? And like you have a very simple format that's gonna work in a lot of different places. It's been proven to work in a lot of places. That makes sense. But for most people out there, like if you're building a new store, like a physical store, you're gonna find out how people interact with that environment and what they think of it and how they feel in it and if they buy things or not based on the placement of the products and that kind of stuff in the store. You're gonna find that out when you get people in the store, right? And you're watching them. So that happens as well with online stores, where once you begin to get some visitor flow onto the store, either from your own organic marketing efforts or working with a marketer like myself to help you when it comes to social media advertising. This is called, being a media buyer or paid media, pay-per-click marketing, using Google ads, like all that kind of stuff, Instagram ads, etc., to get people onto the store. You're gonna start to see how well of a designed bucket do I have. And by bucket, I mean like, a bucket is designed to, you put water in the thing and it fills up quickly, right? But sometimes we build a bucket and like there are different holes in the bucket and we didn't even know it until we put water in. And then all of a sudden you find like it's hard to fill the bucket because all the water is flowing out of the holes, right? And it's like it takes extra work and more money to actually fill the bucket with water. So the goal of a marketer is not only to get water in the bucket or to get traffic or to get foot traffic or to get people coming in. It's also to understand how to optimize that website that you have, because that way, if you send, let's just say like 1,000 people to a store, if one marketer has an optimized site and the other marketer doesn't, the one who has the optimized site is going to convert more of that traffic into customers. And what that does is it gives you a better ROI for your advertising. So when you have a better ROI with your advertising, guess what? You can invest more money again into ads, right? So you can put this back in and it's sort of like this virtuous cycle. If you have a very inefficient store where you're getting lots of traffic, but not many people are buying it, and the marketer's like, I don't know why, man, right? Then it's gonna be very difficult for you to scale the thing because you don't have enough money to be able to put back into this thing to keep marketing, keep advertising it, right? So it's going to be always you reaching into your own piggy bank to be able to do anything with marketing whatsoever. So to me, it's crucial and it's really important that you understand it's not just about paying and investing as another expense to bring traffic to the store. It's also about investing in some of the tools out there, maybe like Hotjar, for example, or having someone set up a dedicated landing page where just certain traffic goes to with maybe specific headlines, for example, or specific creatives like GIFs, images, video. That's to me like one of the most important things as well when it comes to expenses as related to setting up the store. Want to take all the stress out of fulfilling your Kickstarter rewards? Fulfillrite is the turnkey solution that puts product delivery on autopilot. The top campaigns use this trusted high-tech provider to store, package, and ship their products. Focus on growing your business. Leave shipping to the experts. Don't wait. Get a custom quote from Fulfillrite today. Link in the description. The last and final thing that I kind of want to mention here it comes actually to do with like philosophy as it relates to developing a store. And I probably should have mentioned this a tiny bit earlier. I'm sorry if I just been doing a lot of videos and I'm sorry if I didn't get this in earlier, but when it comes to this, there are different ways in which you can get a store made. Now, as a new e-commerce entrepreneur, you should be aware of this because if you choose the wrong way, it's going to be very, very costly, okay? So I'm going to lay out 3 different ways. And I kind of already touched on one, so I'm not going to touch on that too much, which is you doing it yourself, the DIY approach, okay? We already touched on that, high time cost, low financial cost. The other is to have someone do it and to work with you in terms of themes, apps, things that are already out there. They can customize, they can brand, they can make it look really good. And that's kind of like the medium, middle of the road. I say that's probably the best approach for the majority of the audience that I'm talking to right now. The final is what usually typically a lot of people who don't have very much development knowledge go with. And the reason is that they're sold on it, right? Like they're sold on it by a marketing agency or developer or someone who seems like they know what they're doing because they're throwing out all those big fancy buzzwords. We're gonna optimize your store experience. We're gonna use the best technology, right? We're gonna do all these things. But in reality, they don't know what they're doing. They're just using fancy words. It's similar to like you get a contractor that's coming into your house and is like, you know what? You need to replace this, right? Or we'll just say you buy a new car, you get a used car, or you buy a new car, and they're like, we got to replace this, we got to replace that, we got to replace this, and we're going to build you just a custom thing. We're going to rip out everything and redo it, and you get really excited about the notion of getting something brand new, right? But at the end of the day, it costs a lot. It costs an arm and a leg, and it's usually not necessary, right? So this approach of having a custom designed store, to me, is not usually the best approach for the newbie or for someone who just even wants just like a nice, robust store. You don't need a custom store. When you hear custom store, in my mind, I translate that to, a lot of work hours, right? That's gonna take a lot of time. Oh man, I'm gonna make a lot of money here, right? If someone is trying to sell you in a custom store, you should ask them, why not use a framework that's already out there, that works, right? Or that's something that's already existing. And if their answer to you is something like, you should get a custom store because it's going to be looking brand spanking new, it's going to be really powerful and like all this kind of stuff. And don't worry, I promise you it's going to be really good. Like you should probably go the other way in my opinion. And the reason is that not only are custom stores very expensive, do they take a lot of time, but also they aren't always done necessarily with the best development standards, okay? So by that I mean like someone might be using duct tape on your engine and you don't realize it until you open up the thing, right? Or until you get behind the walls, you don't realize that there's duct tape on some of the piping, right? So you should be aware of that like every developer is different and they might be not using the best development practices in general with the actual store. And that translates into a lot of frustration for you. Also, when it comes to maintenance, it's impossible for other people in maintenance. It's very difficult. They're going to charge you a lot to maintain the store. The existing company that's doing it is probably going to be charging you to maintain that store at maybe an exorbitant rate of some kind and justifying it in some way. Other things would be incompatibility. So maybe it's not compatible with other apps that are out there or something like that. Or it's very difficult for anyone to do any kind of changes without first consulting the actual development company that made the thing. So it's kind of like esoteric and difficult to manage or difficult to customize. The other thing would be updates. So let's just say the development company is like, yeah, we made you a great store, it's amazing. And you're like, wow, this is so cool. 2 years go by or a year goes by and all of a sudden all the development standards change, maybe in the same way that like, mobile responsiveness is now a thing and it wasn't always. You come back to them and you're like, hey, I noticed all these things. You guys mind like upgrading the site? And like, sure, it's gonna be this amount to maintain and upgrade the site. And you're like, what? Like, yeah, we made the site for you, but if you want us to upgrade it, it's gonna cost you all this, right? So there's also the maintenance and upgrading, which typically will also be built in if you're going into the middle of the road approach that I recommend. Usually these developers are already updating their themes. So if you're going with someone who's kind of outside, who you're not as familiar with it, that may or may not be included. You don't know. Like you have to really look through the contract and see if they're doing something custom for you, does that include upgrading functionality to modern development standards or modern design standards and website practices? Different trends are always happening every single year when it comes to new websites. So I just want to make sure that if you're going down that route, you understand that. Now, there are pros to having more of a custom site. Some of the pros might be if you already have a big budget and you don't care as much about that stuff and you can afford to hire like internal team of developers. That's great. You're gonna have a very secure solution and particularly a lot of oversight if you have an engineering team, for example. In addition, you're gonna be able to do a lot of cool customization stuff, maybe with involving more augmented reality or syncing up with other stuff. If you have an app, let's just say, that somehow syncs up with the store and there's some other kind of thing that's built into like a live store, an actual physical storefront you have, like you can make things talk to each other and it could be a lot more powerful. So it's very difficult for me to advise on it without knowing your specific case. But I would say that for 90% of the people that I'm helping with on a coaching basis and in general that I talk with, Usually the middle of the road approach tends to be best. In some rare cases do I recommend someone customize and build like a store from scratch. Very rare. I can't even think of off the top of my head one when I have recommended that. Same thing with a custom website. Usually it's always better to build off of robust existing frameworks versus trying to code something yourself. And it's also because it is so hard to find developers that do know what they're doing with good development practices. When you find them, you should stay with them, right? Because I do think it's actually a lot rarer than most people will be aware of. So that being said, I hope that you found this video to be helpful, and this can help you analyze some of the time-related and expense costs that go into setting up a new store. If you are uncertain at all, you can always reach out to me on my website, crowdcrux.com, crowdcrux.com. You can check out some of the links down below when it comes to some of the stuff that I recommend, resources in the description. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Come subscribe for more tips like this. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.